Hello, everyone, and welcome to Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast in all of the internet. My name is Matthew Stoner.
My name is Patrick Nisley.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a very special guest this evening. Joining for the first time, can't believe it, Allison Ebling is on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, Allison?
I am doing great. I am super excited to be here.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, thank you for being here. You're here to talk all about Nintendo announced the OLED model of the Nintendo Switch. That's going to be our main topic, and we're also going to discuss what has Nintendo done for their hardware revisions, from Game Boy to consoles to some other things too. In the news, we'll cover, of course, the OLED model, because we got to fucking talk about it. Of course.
We must.
Some legal stuff happening in Japan for someone selling Breath of the Wild save files, the Sony State of Play, and Donkey Kong's 40th anniversary, as well as much, much more. Before we get started, how y'all doing?
Pretty good. Yeah, doing all right. Kind of a inconsequential week for the most part. How about you guys?
You're still in the process of moving, right, David?
Yeah, I'm in like a temporary, what's the word? Limbo. Kind of, what's the word for when you're not in heaven or hell?
Purgatory.
I guess limbo. Purgatory. That's what I'm looking for. It's very purgatorial where I'm at right now. I'm still over at Baylor's place, who's been letting me stay here. And yeah, just getting moving stuff all set up for next week when I move into my place proper. So maybe if you guys play your cards right, I'll have a different background next week again. What about you, Patrick? How's your fucking mouth?
Yeah, I had another setback with my dental surgery this weekend, and I don't want to get into it too much. I'm feeling better today. I was frustrated because my mouth fucking started pouring out blood again this weekend.
Yikes.
But I went in again, and they were like, they've never had this happen before. And I'm like, well, that's great. But anyway, I feel more hopeful right in this moment than I did, say, yesterday.
There's nothing that breaks your trust with a doctor more than when they're like, we've never seen this before. It's like, really? Isn't this your fucking job?
So what is that?
They feel comfortable telling you that they've never seen it before.
Right,
They're like, man, isn't this great? You get to be our test rabbit.
Well,
yeah, that's a doctor
also,
red flag.
It's also like, well, then any advice you give me is purely speculative, right?
Yeah. So my cat was diagnosed with diabetes, and then like I started giving him insulin and stuff, and they gave me this huge thing of insulin and like all these needles. And then I brought him in, and they were like, "Oh wow, his diabetes seems to be cured. We've never seen that before in 1 week." And I was like, "Wow, really? I'm pretty sure that means he didn't have diabetes."
And now we need to sell you all this anti-diabetes.
We need to pump that diabetes back up. Anyway, so what about you, Allison? How's your week been?
It's been not super eventful. But I was up in New York recently, and so I'm kind of still decompressing from that trip, and then getting my life back together to go back out on the road and tour again. So I have about like a month and a half to get that all together.
That's right. We were talking before the show. You're an audio engineer for traveling shows, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, traveling Broadway shows primarily.
So I bet your Switch gets a lot of use in handheld mode.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty excited to talk about their new revision. I know that there are differing opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are.
But yeah.
What, a Nintendo topic? That's controversial? Where did that come from?
That would never happen.
Matt, you doing all right, man? I don't know if you said how your week was.
Oh yeah, I am doing great. I'll talk about this later, but I finished Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's the first time I've ever watched it. And I was watching the theme song, and my partner comes in. She's like, "You're watching a lot of anime recently." And I just looked at her with the honest reaction. I was like, I think I fucking love anime.
Oh yeah.
Turned a corner.
And it was exactly. It went from like liking it casual to be like, Okay, I think I love this shit. So,
man, those last few episodes of Neon Genesis are pretty out there, huh?
Oh my god! So I don't know what I'm doing or why I exist. So I'm really looking forward to explore it during this episode.
Exactly. You kind of ran out of budget at that point.
Well, all right. Last week we did an episode on Nintendo's approach to retro games, given the sort of people wanting to play Metroid in particular and Skyward Sword coming out. Anyway, Eelvac on our Discord said they're definitely emulating the Metroid GBA games. It's hard to get those. Summer also mentioned that she wants everything on the Switch to have an accurate play history. I think that's a valid point. Like having everything on one place is nice, and then you can see your stats, and I like that. And they also mentioned that our Fire Emblem Three Houses mention, or your mention of that game, David, made them listen to some of the music.
Yeah.
On our Facebook group, Vincent Goodwin had a nice comment about loving the point that we made about movies, how you can, people ask like where you can watch movies, and with games, it's often you can't play them, right? And also some of the others had a really great comment. Everybody should go read it on our Facebook group. It was more in depth than just that, but just kind of talking about Xbox and
I thought that was a good point too, because it's like even when a movie isn't on like Netflix or HBO Max or Paramount Plus or whatever the things are, you can usually pretty much always buy them on like iTunes or something. At least, there's always like a way to watch them, but I suppose, games are a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. And also on our YouTube channel, which everybody should subscribe to, please. Nick Forrest talked about how he really wants them to port Samus Returns to the Switch and how their 3DS broke and that kind of thing. They had a bad week too, that week that I had a bad week with some medical stuff. So sorry about that, Nick. Hope things are better for you.
Yeah.
And then everybody should, subscribe on YouTube, leave us comments, send us notes. We love to hear from you. We'll give you a shout out like that. Check out the Playing It Wrong sub podcast. Send us listener questions, all that lovely stuff. Is there anything I skipped over there that you want to mention?
No, I did just want to say thank you everybody for being patient on the Legend of Zelda fan fiction audiobooks that I'm creating. I've obviously been in a lot of transition periods here. But once I get into my new place and I get my new office set up and everything, I'll be recording those for you, adding in lots of sound design. Allison, you're an audio engineer. You know the deal.
I was going to say, that sounds like so much fun.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been wanting to do it. It's just like, it's not been the right spot. I'm in a very echoey room right now. So it'll be coming up within the next couple months. So thank you for your patience and keep subscribing. Because if we get to 350, we're all going to get ripped. Little Discord inside joke for you.
We're all going to be swole. David, this is what I hope what happens is you release the audiobooks and then like what Nintendo Pal Block or whatever the blog that posted about the anime that is like Castlevania audio engineer pitches Legend of Zelda anime. It's like part of your pitch.
Yeah. It'll be we'll call it like an officially licensed Nintendo audio drama.
Yeah, we're gonna get sued if we do that. Didn't you? We got something in the news here.
Hey, it'll put as long any press is good press. All right, we got to grow this podcast.
I mean, for our podcast folks, that's why David did air quotes.
Another good reason to subscribe to the YouTube channel.
All right, well, we're gonna talk about the gaming and Nintendo news and rumors for the week. The big one, obviously, we'll just kind of quickly gloss over this because it's our main topic, but out of nowhere, though not really, because there's been rumors of it forever, Switch OLED model got announced. This is a new Switch revision, not quite the Switch Pro you were looking for, maybe.
Right.
It's got a bigger screen, less bezel, slightly bigger price. Comes in a nice clean white.
Kind of. Some of it does.
Or you can get a red
just the Joy-Cons, right?
Yeah. And the dock is white too, right?
I guess the dock is white as well. Yeah.
And then it's got a bigger kickstand. What are the facts here? What am I missing?
The LAN port.
Right.
The big edition.
Yeah. They took away the USB 3.0 from inside the console and made it to where it's just Ethernet port, which is good for people that were too lazy to buy an Ethernet adapter. Bad if you want to plug a shit ton of USB stuff into your Switch.
Right.
A little bit more storage, 64 gigs on the actual Switch system. more. The battery, I guess, is maybe better, or is it about the same?
I think it's the same as their last revision, their battery upgrade.
That's right.
For whatever Switch version it was, which was what, 2019, I think.
I think,
They
yeah,
made
the
that
red
which
change.
is now the only Switch, right? Like the main
Right,
Switch,
right. Yeah,
unless you get lucky and find an old one, or lucky, air quotes. Yeah. Anything else? But I guess that we could mention that like Digital Foundry did some analysis on this and talked about it. And apparently they also mentioned that there's a new dev kit that's gone out to developers. If you don't know what that is, it's like special kits for consoles. So people who make games, so they can test on it, that it has some new specs as well, right? More RAM.
Right, which obviously begs a pretty big question, which is why, right? If this model, is coming out and they've said that it doesn't have any RAM improvements, doesn't have any CPU improvements, it's just basically a handheld only improvement for the most part, right? Is like the new screen and better sound coming out of the speakers and everything like that. If that's the case, then why are developers getting a new model that has 8 gigs of RAM instead of 6? Not to like immediately start stoking the Switch Pro rumor flames again, but it's like, what? Like, why? Like, shouldn't that not matter? I guess is the question, but I don't know if anybody really has an answer for that right now. It's a little up in the air.
Yeah. Well, we can speculate more about what that means maybe in the main topic. And this is coming out on October 8th. I'm sure we'll mention that again, but so that's not that far away, just about a couple months, few months.
Worth mentioning that it's coinciding with the Metroid Dread release, which was heavily pushed in this video. Lots of Metroid Dread footage in this. You could even argue that the console kind of looks like the enemies in Metroid Dread with the white as well. Matt, yeah. I think you pointed that out on our Twitter, which surprisingly that post was in a beat 'em ups video, so that's kind of fun. Like scrolled past it for 0.5 seconds.
We'll move on then, because we'll talk more about all that, I'm sure. There was a very minor Switch system OS update. We got 12.1.0 came out on July 5th. We got more stability, of course, but I guess the one sort of major thing on this update is that now when you're downloading things, it can give you the option to delete software in the moment rather than having a download fail and then you have to like redo it. Is that my understanding? Is that right? Something like that. Slightly better really downloading experience. Yeah. Very minor thing, but I have heard some people.
I haven't run into that yet, so it's like that'll probably be really nice though, because like I am just at a constant state of being 100% full on both my internal storage and my SD card. So pretty much anytime I install a new game, I have to pick a game to delete, which is kind of a bit of an annoying process because it's always like, here, delete the biggest one. And I'm like, no. And then I have to like go in and pick. So if they've streamlined that at all, like that'll be a welcome addition, I think.
Yeah. And then we got a little bit of a look into Monolith Soft's profits for the year. There's a Japanese publication of some kind called Kanpo that I guess indicated just how well Monolith Soft did. And this is with the fiscal year ending the end of March of this year, 2021. Sounds like they've had some big profits, which obviously, Xenoblade has done pretty well, right? How's our resident Xeno head feel about this? You think Monolith Soft deserves
I'm familiar
lots of
with
money?
That franchise. Yeah, I think this is great. Monolith Soft, they're mostly known for Xenoblade, but they also help out in the development of Breath of the Wild and also Animal Crossing as well. So they're kind of helping out Nintendo on multiple fronts. This is great for them.
I did not know they worked on Animal Crossing.
I wonder what they did.
According to this article that is in our show notes.
I don't click the articles. Okay.
I know these things.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's very interesting though. And you're right. I mean, I'm sure, obviously they're getting lots more profits from helping out on all these franchises, plus running their own very successful franchise. And like there have been before Xenoblade Chronicles 2, like there were Xenoblade Chronicles games on the Wii and Wii U, but it just kind of shows like just how powerful the Switch is and how, that's why I'm really expecting Metroid Dread to be like a rebirth. I think I saw it somewhere on the internet today. Is like, is this going to be like the awakening of the Metroid series, like the Fire Emblem Awakening, like how that really rejuvenated the series, and it really does feel like it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, good for them. I think if anybody is smart, they're going to just be releasing as many old franchises onto the Switch as possible and get a lot of new life and money.
Donkey Kong had its 40th anniversary. I guess you could say maybe Mario did too. July 9th was the day that the Donkey Kong arcade cabinets were released in Japan 40 years ago, 1981. So that's pretty cool. I mean, I don't think there was any official acknowledgement of this by Nintendo, but elsewhere online, lots of people were talking about it. Yeah, so I don't know. What do y'all think about that? Like, that's Mario's birthday too, right? Mario's 40 years old. Jumpman.
It's Jumpman's birthday. Jumpman is Mario's uncle.
Is that how the lineage works?
Yeah, like how Cranky Kong is the original Donkey Kong, and then Donkey Kong is like his fucking, I don't know, the godson or something. I don't know exactly what the lineage is there either. No, but this. I mean, great. This is like one of the OG Nintendo franchises. Like I think it was maybe Kyle on our Discord who was talking about like how. If they had made a Popeye game instead of this Donkey Kong game, like they were originally supposed to do, like how different the whole history of Nintendo would be up to this point, because it ended up being a huge smash hit.
Yeah. And Donkey Kong has given us so much. I mean, Matt Manchester, who works over at Retro, friend of the podcast, was sharing a bunch of pictures from Tropical Freeze and all the Easter eggs within that game, just celebrating the 40 years of Donkey Kong. But also, without Donkey Kong, we wouldn't have gotten the great documentary King of Kong, which I love so much, and I love Steve Wiebe and everything he's about. I think so. Hopefully, he's okay. I don't know if he's got canceled, but I love him.
He seems like a sweet, like good boy kind of guy. Like for sure, he's definitely got that energy. I know there was like a Nintendo Life article too. That was like ranking the Donkey Kong games from worst to best. It was like 25 games over the course of the franchise. And I think that we are in like a really good kind of golden age of Donkey Kong right now. Even though like we haven't had a release in a while, it's like, I feel like the modern era, we've really gotten it down, because up towards the top was like
Tropical Freeze was number one, I think.
Tropical Freeze was number one. I think Donkey Kong Returns was number three or four, something like that. And then obviously DKC2 is in there, and then the original Game Boy, the Game Boy version of the Donkey Kong arcade game. So it's like, I just hope that we carry this forward, and if these rumors are true about R&D working on a Donkey Kong game, I really hope we're in for some good stuff here in the future.
Allison, you like Donkey Kong games?
I unfortunately never really got into Donkey Kong as a franchise. Just kind of the environment that I was in, it was mostly Mario and Zelda from the original.
You're a Jumpman fan.
Yes, Jumpman for life. But yeah, for whatever reason, they never really took off with me.
It's never too late to get into it.
Tropical Freeze is the best one, and it's available on the Switch. Yeah.
All right, I'll check it out because right now I'm a little bit of a lull on my Switch playing at the moment.
Yeah, that's a great one. I really wish whenever they ported that game from the Wii U over to the Switch, that they had also ported Donkey Kong Returns from the Wii, because they brought that game to the 3DS, which is cool to play that on a 3DS. But it's like that game was also fantastic, and I think it just would have made a great 2-pack on the Switch. So it's unfortunate, it's kind of like what we were talking about last week, how it's like not. We just want every game on the Switch, and it's not really possible. But that's a good game, too. If you still have a Wii lying around or you have a 3DS, that's a good one to pick up, too.
Sweet.
In sadder anniversary news, July 11th was the 6-year anniversary of Iwata's passing, the former Nintendo developer president who passed away at a relatively young age back in 2015, I think it was. And similarly was being acknowledged by lots of people online. Very influential in his approach to things. So, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. If you want to learn more about the guy, check out that Ask Iwata book. Fantastic insight kind of into his brain. It's all mostly written in his voice through like blog posts and shit that he would make online that they kind of collected. He was a brilliant guy and like a very humble man and a great developer too. So definitely worth checking up on some of his history if you're interested.
Just briefly here, Famitsu sometimes publishes like the monthly physical game sales in Japan, and just we talk about a lot on this podcast. Nintendo's on top. They have a lot of the top selling physical games in Japan. This is from like roughly the end of May to the end of June that these numbers are from. But Game Builder Garage, Mario Golf, Miitopia are all up on the top of the list, and then a bunch of other Nintendo franchises near the top 2, including Ring Fit Adventure up there, which I guess that game has a long tail, right? Or maybe because the coronavirus is so bad in Japan right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's still only like a 3% vaccination rate in Japan right now. It's like ridiculously low. Yeah.
So people need something to keep fit inside there.
That's why why everybody's going crazy. They're like, why the fuck are you doing the Olympics? They just don't get it. Yeah.
Well, Sony had a...
Now let's talk about that for a
while. We totally can. I'm all for real things, occasionally at least. But unless y'all want to dig into that, the Sony had a state of play. I actually did not watch this state of play, so I don't know a lot about it. I heard that the big thing was Deathloop is what they showed off. Maybe some like VR announcements, right, that came out of it. Did y'all watch this, or anybody have any big picture, or at least read up about it?
Yeah, it was okay. It's missing some of the charm that other presentations do. Sony's really missing something about it. They show a lot of games, and the presentation's always good, but some of the personality, I don't know, is different. But they did show lots of games, which is always good. And they started off with Moss. If you've ever played Moss, you play as Quill, little mouse. And Moss is a great VR game. And so they announced
Moss Book 2, right?
That's right. Yeah, they announced a sequel to Moss. Recommend if you have any VR headset. I think it's available on pretty much everything. Play Moss. It's super cute, super fun.
Cool. And anything else come out of it for you?
I watched like half of it, and it definitely did seem a little dull. It was like it was missing like a big, really interesting game. And I think like Deathloop, like the thing that I mainly took away from Deathloop was that like it has console exclusivity up until like next year, because that's like one of these last like Bethesda games that didn't quite fall under the Microsoft merger, right? Or the Microsoft acquisition. So like that was kind of my main takeaway from it, which is like not really what Sony probably wanted as the main takeaway from this. Like, oh, this will be going up to Microsoft at some point, but. Was there any Death Stranding?
Yeah, that wasn't this where the Death Stranding, whatever it's called. I've heard it's like, is it called a director's cut? But he doesn't like that term or something like that. Kojima,
extra cut. I don't fucking
know. I guess because I saw that he didn't like that term, but maybe it's called something different in Japanese because it's not like stuff that was cut, right? It's like extra content that he purposefully is adding or something like that.
I don't know. He's just been hanging out with Hollywood directors too much. He's been hanging out with like Nicholas Winding Refn and Guillermo del Toro too much. They're rubbing off on him.
Did that have any appeal to anybody? No. Everybody's kind of making.
I don't know. I don't know if I'll replay Death Stranding. I would need some big draw to bring me back into it. They announced a bunch of new items and like cool ramps and cool vehicles and like a racing mode. But it's really that's a hard
they're adding gameplay into the game.
Yeah. Dude, I love delivering packages, picking them up and dropping them off.
Yeah, I never played this game, and I feel like, and I don't have a PS5, so it's like, I mean, I think it's also on PS4 as well, right? This expanded version. But it's like, so it's maybe I'll pick it up at some point, but it's definitely not something that ever really interested me as a gamer with a very low patience. It's like really hard for me to get into RPGs and kind of slow moving games. I'm afraid that this game might kind of bore me to tears.
So a few months ago, a copy of like the NES Mario Brothers game sold at auction, like the original one, like I think a sealed one or whatever, for like $600 something thousand. And David, at the time, I remember you going, it won't be long before some game sells for over $1 million. And you know what? It happened. So like also another game actually like sold, a Zelda game sold for like 800,000 or something at some auction.
It was like earlier in the week. Yeah.
And then that news got outpaced because a copy of Mario 64 just sold at like a sealed rare copy, I guess, because of whatever production print it was or whatever, sold for like $1.5 million fucking dollars.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah. I mean, this is like, it's just happening now for the sake of it happening, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it's making me think that like every time I buy a game for anything, I just need to buy two of them. Like if I'm going to buy a physical copy, I just need to buy two and then stick one on a shelf and wait.
Yep. And that's how these kind of things crash, right? Like that's why baseball cards in the 80s crashed, because baseball cards were starting from the 60s were having value. So people just started buying them as investments, and then they are now worth baseball cards from the 80s are worthless
right
now because there's so many of them in good condition.
Yeah, well, it just feels like there's some kind of like fuckery going on here. Like, am I not to get too conspiracy theorist, but it's like, you know,
some warehouse out there has a bunch of like sealed games from these eras, and they're like
slowly trickle them out.
Well, it's like, I mean, it's like, you know, and all these things are like rated and whatever by like these companies that check their mint status and shit like that. It's like the whole Pokemon card thing going on right now too. It's like as soon as one of these things starts selling for $100 or for $1.5 million, it's just like all the price of everything else starts to go up. It's like, you know. And I feel like just normal versions of that game will start to become more expensive because a super rare sealed copy sold for 1.5 million. So it's just like, I just think that there's this like weird like rush on retro games right now. It feels like the gold rush or whatever. And like it does feel like a bubble, you know, like the housing market and shit like that, where it's just like, where like everything is just getting totally out of control and people are just speculating on this shit. And because people are spending this much, it's making the prices go up and up and up even more. And maybe I just don't understand economics, and maybe that made no sense. But yeah, it definitely feels like there's something weird going on in the background here.
Yeah, it's a bunch of rich people just throwing their money around to give value to something that doesn't necessarily have that perceived value.
Yeah,
totally.
It's like art. You know, the funny thing is like Lars Ulrich buying a Bescott for like millions and millions and millions of dollars just so he could have one in his living room.
Yeah.
Well, did I just alienate everyone?
No, you're totally right.
I both hate art and Metallica. No, but if you are holding on to some sealed copy of some game from this era, sell it now. While this market is not crashed, or because I think it will. Yeah.
Either that or you'll get fucking $2 million for a Pokemon Gold or whatever. I don't know. I think, can we safely blame all this on Logan Paul? I think that's fair, right?
Yeah, that's
that
okay.
would make me feel better.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Let's start a feud with Logan Paul in this episode.
I blame Lars Ulrich.
Yeah, you know what? I bet I could take Logan Paul in a fight.
Let's fucking go. Okay.
All right.
I'll come out with like a fucking like McDonald's Pokemon card around my neck.
Moving on, in Japan, there was an individual who was selling save files for Breath of the Wild. I don't know how that exactly works, but I don't know. And they were arrested, and apparently, according to the news articles about this, Japan is cracking down on this kind of like hacking or selling like hacked versions of games, even though it's just save files. That's weird to me. Maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe they're modded save files or something.
They are modded.
Okay.
They're modified save files. Yeah.
Because it seems that makes.
I think the only way that you can actually get them onto your system is if you also have a modified system, right? So that's probably why this has been happening, is because of the whole like kind of hardware modding scene, and Nintendo's really trying to crack down on that. And this is like specifically a Japanese thing, right? Like this also happened with some like Pokemon saves, or they were selling like shiny Pokemon that they like modded into the game, and that was a big no-no for Nintendo as well.
Yeah. And also for Japanese law, apparently.
Yeah.
So very interesting. Don't just give it away, I guess, or don't do it,
or sell them to Americans.
Put them in auction. Sell them to Los Ulrich.
$2.5 million.
Yeah.
This person made 90 grand. Like
In doing this?
Yeah. Just selling at them at like about $32, approximately $32 a piece.
They could buy like a 50th of a Nintendo 64 Mario.
Oh my God.
64 cart. All right.
Imagine being in like a Japanese prison and all these like big time like Yakuza fucking dudes, with big muscles and tats, like walking around, and you're in there because you were selling Breath of the Wild saves. Like that would be insane, dude.
And you know, everyone's like, man, Breath of the Wild, such a good game.
Yeah, all the Yakuza are like, hey man, sell me one of those. I'll give you a pack of cigarettes for a Breath of the Wild save. A strange story.
So Skyward Sword is released HD. Skyward Sword HD is releasing this week, this Friday. So just a few days after this podcast comes out. And Nintendo trickling out the information about this. They've said that there is going to be changes made to the beginning part of this game, which if you've played it, you know, is long. I actually had no problems with that personally when I played it, but I know that a lot of people complain about the opening tutorial. It's not like a tutorial. I guess it kind of is. It's just the whole
it's like
story.
the prologue of the game.
Yeah, it's really long, and I guess that, you know, I understand they're going to make that a little bit of a smoother with maybe some things you can kind of skip and that kind of stuff, right? That's my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's good that they're listening to people, and there's maybe some other changes they announced about camera control. I didn't know about this one.
So they didn't actually announce this. It's just if you watch that video, you can see the camera is being moved freely in it, right? And so this has just kind of been something that's been weird about this release, is that a lot of information about quality of life improvements they didn't talk about up until like this week. You know what I mean? Which people have been like, why? Like, why hold that stuff back, right? You know, like in the Wii version, like the Wii doesn't have a second stick, right? It's just a remote. So like a lot of games just didn't have proper camera control. You know, that's why like, you know, Mario Galaxy is like, there's barely any camera control in that, even in the Switch version, right?
Will this one though? Because isn't the second stick your sword thing?
Well, that's why people are confused. They don't, because there clearly free. Yeah. There clearly is free camera because you can see it moving, right? And it's not just like on the Wii version. In order to move the camera, you pretty much had to move your body and then Z target into whatever direction you were facing,
or you had to use your sword to look around. That was like the only way.
Yeah,
in that one,
I guess you're right.
the dowsing, you could like look around that way. But I always imagine if you could have a free roaming camera while like you were doing that, I thought that would be hilarious just to see that from third person.
Yeah. So, you know, so there's lots of little stuff like that. You know, they've talked about the fee, not having to. She doesn't talk to you every single time. There's lots of little quality of life stuff. They went further into autosaves in that video as well, which is something that people had picked up on just from seeing it in the video earlier, but now they've like officially said it. So it's just weird. It's been a weird rollout for this game for sure.
It kind of feels like they're like begrudgingly giving more information about it. Like they put out the initial trailer and they're like, oh yeah, we're releasing this again. And then people are like, but why would we buy it? And they're like, okay, fine. Here's a few reasons. And people are like, well, that's not enough. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, here's a few more reasons.
Right.
Like the day before they release, they're like, oh, by the way, there's like a whole extra section after the game. And everyone's going to go, what?
It does feel like they'll have some last minute announcement. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely don't think that's the case as much as I would love that to be. You know, it's like,
hey, guess what? You get to play the first 4 hours of Breath of the Wild too.
Right? Every fucking person in the world would buy this game. Yeah. But it would sell 10 billion copies. No, I think for my speculation on this is that basically just like they don't have a Bowser's Fury for this game, right? And so it's like for Mario 3D World, like they had a whole brand new game basically built onto that. So like people were talking about that like in the lead up, and they could like explain in the lead up to this game, like, hey, here's how Bowser's Fury works and all this kind of shit. This game doesn't really have it. And so they need something to fill the news cycle in the weeks leading up to the game, something to tweet about every once in a while. So they're just kind of slowly doling out these quality of life improvements as if it's, you know, taking the place of like new content added to the game, which it really seems like there won't be, unfortunately, for this release.
Yeah, no Groose playable side mission.
Dude, if you could get
disappointment.
I needed a new Groose Plus mode. Okay. I want to start the game over full HP and as Groose.
All right. Well, that does it for our news and rumors for the week. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk all about the Switch OLED model and Nintendo's console and handheld revision history. All right, so Nintendo just announced a new Switch revision iteration, the OLED model, on July 6th. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that and what that means for future revisions of the console, the Switch Pro rumor stuff. And we're also going to kind of try to maybe look to the past and see if that sheds any light on this with what Nintendo has done with their console, and specifically handheld revisions, because it's when they've done revisions, there's been lots of them with the handhelds and not quite so much with the consoles. Of course, the Switch is in a weird position of being both, but I think we'll maybe gain some insight from that, but it's Nintendo, so who knows? So we'll start with the Switch OLED. We kind of talked about it already, but we kind of talked about the facts. Can we talk about personal opinions now? Like, how do we feel about it? You know, we kind of covered all the specs and the differences.
Well, there are a couple things that we did leave out.
Okay, you want to do that first?
In talking about the specs, yeah, just to kind of briefly go over, because there are like a few other changes, and I think that before it comes out, we probably will find out a few more little things that make it different.
They made the tutorial shorter.
Sure, yeah, exactly. Less dialogue from Groose on this new Switch OLED model.
That's a step in the wrong direction.
Right. Well, first of all, it is slightly longer. So like, if you have like a Satisfy grip or like third-party accessories that like make the Switch easier, those probably aren't going to work anymore on this thing, right? And it's only like 1 or 2 millimeters longer. You know, it's like not very much, but it's enough to like throw off any accessories that you have. And then also another little thing was, and this one's really splitting hairs, but since we are a Nintendo podcast, I figured we should talk about it. There's like a little dot on top of the system now, and people were like, what is that? And that's actually the ambient light sensor, because that was taking up part of the bezel, which is now going to be covered by the screen. So there's little things like that, right? Like that will, and little things like that, I think we'll be finding more and more and more out about it.
It weighs slightly more as well.
Right. Yeah. It weighs a little bit more. But you know, I mean, I do think like the OLED screen's going to be really nice. And also I do want to say, I feel like everybody's like, no one saw them calling it the Switch OLED model like coming up. But I do want to say that a couple episodes ago, when we were coming up with what we thought the names of the Switch Pro would be, I did say Nintendo Switch 4K version, which I think is pretty fucking close to Nintendo Switch OLED model. I like knew it would be something like that, right? But anyway, sorry. I just wanted to get that out there before we got too much more into this.
Cool. Well, then, now that we got some of those spec additional things pointed out, what do y'all think about this? Did you watch this video, and how were you surprised? Were you thrilled? Were you scratching your head? Are you going to get it?
I think I was a little like overly excited when I first saw it, because it was one of those things like I kind of went through my morning routine. You know, I woke up, I like looked at some headlines, and then like the last stop is like YouTube. And so I opened up YouTube, and like the very first thing was Nintendo Switch OLED model. And I was like, oh my God, they actually they're doing it. And then it's like, as the video goes on, you kind of go, oh wait, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. It's still neat that they're updating it, but it's not quite it's got like most of what people were speculating, but not everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of a mixed initial reaction. I had the moment of, I am kind of primarily a handheld player. It wasn't really until like this year that I even like found my dock and and plugged it back in, and then I was reminded, how much nicer it looks in dock mode. I was like, oh yeah, I've been playing, handheld for so long, but that I was like, oh well, this is nice for people who are new players and for handheld only users. But initially I was a little I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not I was going to pick one up.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you leaning now?
Currently I'm leaning yes, probably not on release date. I kind of see myself picking it up, particularly if they do like a special edition for, a franchise that I'm interested in, if I can get my hands on it, because we all know how that works.
Mm-hmm.
But that, if they do a special edition version of one, then 100% I'll get one. Because I still have my Switch is the 2017 launch model.
Mm-hmm.
So the battery life, especially since I play primarily in handheld, it just sucks.
Yeah.
So it's like, I was like, oh, well, this is a good enough reason to upgrade, if I can get a decent like trade in or even just sell to somebody else who wants a Switch, a little bit less than the list price. It's worth it would be a worthwhile upgrade for someone like me, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, are you planning on picking one of these up? Like, what do you think about this thing?
I mean, I would in the podcast. I'd be like, I don't know, but let's be honest. Gonna get this fucking thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, having an OLED screen, it does make a difference. I mean, if y'all have ever owned a Vita or have an OLED phone or a television, the fact that like there's infinite blacks, it really does change the depth of the games that you're playing. I mean, it does make a difference, whether it be 1080p or not. It is quite the drastic change for some of the atmosphere and the games. I think it's a mild upgrade, a very mild upgrade, but I think people are still going to buy it.
Oh yeah,
as much as people complain about it, I think it's worthwhile for some people.
This has been pointed out before, but on the YouTube announcement trailer for this, the like to dislike ratio is actually pretty positive. And I feel like Nintendo fans are like the first to go in and just like, click the dislike shit on anything that pisses them off. You know what I mean? And so I think that really kind of shows that a lot of people are probably planning on picking this up. I think that the Switch has been kind of stale for a while for people that have already owned it. And so I think people have been wanting excuses to buy new versions. I know, like me personally, I was really tempted by that Mario model, like the red one, just because I thought it looked pretty, and then in the Animal Crossing one, I was tempted by even the Redbox Switch. Whenever that came out, I was like, man, 3 extra hours of battery. That sounds pretty nice, And so it's like, for me, like now this is the opportunity to actually upgrade. And, I've got my Switch, like every time I play in handheld mode, this fucking shitty ass kickstand bothers me so much, so I think just that alone
it's
would
worth
be
$350.
I mean, I don't know if that's worth $350. I'd love to be able to pay like $100 to upgrade it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, I think that's going to be really nice. I think having the nice like full, Microsoft Surface-esque kickstand with the bigger screen is going to make tabletop play actually more appealing. You know what I mean? I think the main problem right now is that the screen is just like a little too small for tabletop mode to like work for my old tired eyes, right? And so I think having a sharper image with better blacks, like you were saying, Matt, I think is going to be really nice. And I'm the kind of guy who like uses my Switch pretty much half in handheld mode and half in docked mode, right? So it's like, for me, an OLED screen is a really nice improvement. I was just watching I've been watching this show called The Nick. It's about like the birth of modern medicine, and a lot of that show is like really dark and naturally lit. You know what I mean? And there's like a whole scene that was taking place like in the bowels of a ship or something like that. And I was like kind of going back and forth between my TV and my phone, watching the show. My TV is an OLED TV, and those scenes were like really nice and crisp and amazing because it's really dark, and so the contrast was great. And then whenever I was watching it on my phone, I just like couldn't fucking tell what the hell was happening in any of the scenes. So it's like it really does make a huge difference, and I think games could use that really well. So I'm definitely gonna be picking one up.
I will be trying to as well. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there when you said, like, I'm looking for an excuse to get one, and this is a good enough excuse. I think that's true for me too. Like, I kind of want to be able to give my old one to my son, and I want a new dock because we got a second TV situation in our house now and that kind of stuff. And so, like, it seems like a great excuse. And also we do a Switch podcast, so that helps me make the excuse.
We didn't get any other revisions, we didn't get any of the other ones. But
what do y'all think about the price? They priced this at $50 more than the regular Switch. It's $350 right now, or I'll presume when it comes out. That's a little bit. That's more than like the Xbox Series S, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like we've all talked about, this is a very slight revision. So it feels like it's kind of like is it, we're all talking about getting it, but what do you think that price is unreasonable? Obviously it's not, they can get away with it because we all just pointed out we'll get it, but
I think that was like the maximum price that they could possibly hope to charge and still be able to sell it without a hardware upgrade. And it might be the kind of thing where they start it at that price. I know Nintendo is historically, they don't drop the prices of things. But, the more that I thought about kind of like what Nintendo might be thinking in the long run, again, who knows really. But that, they might get to a point where they might just like run out of the LCD screens that they had purchased for the original Switches. And then they just discontinue the LCD and the OLED takes over. And then the big question remains, do they keep it at $350 or do they drop that to $300 at the point where they discontinue? But the only way that would make sense is if they introduce then a newer model with a hardware upgrade. Otherwise, they'll never drop the price of the OLED one.
I love that speculation, and I agree. Like, I think that seems like we can't predict the future, but that seems like a very possible scenario that could happen.
I mean, I don't see a reason to continue making an LCD version for the long run when you have an OLED one on the market. Like, I think the purchase trends will show that new buyers will buy the OLED version over the LCD.
Total. And that's what happened with the red box Switch, right? Like, they just phased out that white box Switch. Like, they kind of went through their stock with like Mario Kart 8 bundles and shit, like over the holidays, right? And it was like, hey, get this, we're flushing it out, right? And I think that's probably why it's called OLED model and not like new Nintendo Switch or Switch XL or something like that. It's because eventually this will be the standard model of this system. That kind of does circle back to, I mean, this is just a disappointing price, I think. I think, I think that like what I would have wanted was like, for me, like I've been looking for an excuse to upgrade, but now I feel like I'm kind of getting cucked into it by the extra $50. You know what I mean? It's like they're just like, oh, we know people will do it, so like let's just fucking do it. And the thing is too that they're probably paying less for these OLED panels than they were for the LCD panels, to be honest. And I bet the build for this system is actually cheaper than it is for the current model of Switch, and they're going to be making more as well. So I think this is going to be something that's going to be really popular with their investors, you know what I mean? And the board and shit like that. And I think it's like a really smart business move. It's just like, the question is just like, when they come out with another version, are they going to be able to price that at $350, or are they going to have to, hike that up to $400? Because all the speculation about the Switch Pro and it being able to output 4K and having DLSS and all this, all the half of the shit from the Bloomberg article that ended up not being what this was, right? Like, everybody was expecting that to be $350. If this is $350, what would an actual improvement be priced at? Would they go up to $400? They've never done that before.
Right.
Well, I think we should talk about that. One thing I did want to mention, though, is that the pre-orders have not happened yet, at least in these states. I think they have in the UK.
Yeah.
So we're all kind of worried about that, right? I mean, because aren't you worried that this is going to sell out?
Scalpers are already selling UK pre-orders for like $700 on eBay.
Wow.
Yeah, so the four of us, or Allison, you said you might not want to get it at launch day. None of the rest of us that might want to might not be able to. So,
well, I mean, that's part of it too, right? Is
Right.
like, when I'm still kind of like, I'm like, well, my Switch still works.
Yeah.
That it's like, why not wait till it calms down a little bit and ride it out? I mean, that's really what I was kind of doing with my current Switch. I was like, well, maybe like there've been so many rumors about a revision. Maybe I just need to wait it out. And now I'm kind of like, maybe I just need to wait it out some more.
and I think that I think that it's totally fine. I think people are gonna have FOMO, and so like people are gonna like buy because of FOMO, right? But it's like realistically, like if you think critically about it, especially if you're somebody who plays with it attached to your TV, for the most part, you really don't need this.
Agreed.
Like if you have a Switch already, fucking people have giant SD cards. The extra storage space inside doesn't really matter. It's attractive, and I'm glad that they did make it bigger. But it's like you really don't need this, and I think a lot of people are going to get it because of hype and because of FOMO. But I think that if you can temper yourself and you're like somebody who's a patient gamer, I think that this is probably something you should wait on.
Well, maybe then now we can talk about, we already talked a little bit about what this means for Switch Pro, and Allison laid out a nice possible scenario we might see that seems quite likely to me. How does this change the timeline for another revision? Because, we were all thinking this was going to be a more substantial revision. Do you think this means any other revision has to be a certain amount of time away? There, like you mentioned, David, there was that Bloomberg article that had some of the stuff was true for this. Some of it seems not to be. Some insiders like Jeff Grubb have talked about how they've heard there was some other one coming in 2022. Nintendo has been on the record saying they really want the Switch to last for 6 to 10 years, which would probably mean there's revisions. Past history shows that. We'll go over that some. But what do y'all think this means for the timeline specifically? Do you think that it's possible next year we get another revision, or do you think that they'll have to wait? There's obviously that pricing issue you mentioned too, which I think is interesting.
Do you have any ideas on that, Matt?
I mean, I don't know if there's going to be a major hardware revision in a year from now. I think, Allison, you mentioned this. What's more realistic to me is special editions. Maybe we see a Breath of the Wild OLED, or we see, I don't know, some other Monster Hunter, another Monster Hunter special edition, or something like that. And kind of we'll see that over the next couple of years, and then maybe in 2023 or 2024 we have a brand new hardware revision that is still the same OLED panel, but has some upgraded specs like more RAM, more CPU, Bluetooth audio.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Bluetooth audio stuff, they're already, the current Switch already supports it. They just haven't like unlocked it yet, or like allowed it to happen. Like it's been happening in the background with a lot of these firmware updates. They've basically allowed for that to happen. The connections are in there and the tech is there. That's like a software unlockable thing. And so that's something that I could totally see them doing with the release of this, that they could easily add as like a selling point, even though the Switch currently could do it. You know what I mean? So yeah, so that seems like something very Nintendo-y. And this is something that I talked about before too. I think that like, and maybe I'm not really answering your question, Patrick, but it's
that's fine. It's a conversation.
Yeah. But it's like, I could see them releasing a lot of very requested firmware features with this. You know what I mean? Maybe not holding it to this, but like just alongside the release of this, like, themes and folders and, stuff like that, like the Bluetooth stuff that we've been talking about, right?
All I really want is for them to allow the screen to flip. Like, and I know you probably need gyros to do that. So it's like, if you can only flip it with your Joy-Cons in.
Well, there is a gyro in the system itself.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's like, why? Because the thing that really, really bugs me, and again, it wouldn't really super solve the problem now that they've made the kickstand bigger. Yeah. But, being able to play it in tabletop mode with a power adapter. Because the power adapter is on the bottom, the power port's on the bottom. So being able to flip your screen so you can have it plugged in without a third-party accessory would be fantastic.
Yeah, nice. It's weird that they did not solve that problem with this design update.
the more that I thought about it, I was like, oh, I mean, I guess, they're not going to move the power port because they expect you to put the Switch into the dock the same way, with the Joy-Cons up. So like, I get that. Just let us flip the screen.
Mm-hmm. Well, why, if you're not seeing what's on the screen anyway, why couldn't you just put the Switch in upside down into the dock? That's a fair question, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, but anyway, whatever. It's fucking Nintendo, right? But as far as like timeline goes, like, and that Bloomberg article in particular, I find very interesting to think about, right? Because they got like precisely like half of it right, like they were like, I feel like two different things are going on in the research and development departments of the Nintendo hardware division, right? I think that they have been working on this thing, and I think that they got reports from manufacturers saying, hey, we make these OLED panels and we just shipped fucking millions of them out to Nintendo. So they're like, okay, well, clearly this thing's going to have an OLED model, right? So they got that right. And I think they're also hearing reports from within Nintendo of being like, we're targeting 4K, we're going for DLSS and all this NVIDIA shit. And I think that is also true. I just think that they heard both of these reports at the same time and just conflated them, right?
Totally. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I've heard that, when journalists use anonymous sources and stuff like that, they like to have more than one and preferably at least two. And if they're getting two sources that are saying they're working on revisions and they're getting maybe some facts from each of them, it could be exactly what we're thinking here, right? That there is a future thing in the pipeline that has those other things.
And so I have to kind of like, what I've been trying to ask myself is like, it's like this comes down to like how Nintendo wants to market this stuff, right? Because like they could put this thing out now, and this, and we'll get into a little bit like Nintendo's like history of revisions, but it's like, this is more 3DS XL than it is a new 3DS, right? Like, this is a slightly bigger screen. They could have totally called this the Switch XL, but like you said, Allison, I think they're just trying to phase out the old Switch, right? So I think they didn't want to go with that naming mechanism. But it's like, this feels to me like that. The question is, when it comes time to release whatever the DLSS 4K thing is that's been talked about, because I don't doubt that that's not it's not like, oh, Bloomberg was just making that up, right? I'm sure that is happening. The question is, do they hold it and release it as a Switch 2 or like, the next Nintendo console? Or do they release it earlier in the Switch's life cycle, keep it the same system and make it like a new 3DS, right? And my question then is like, is there a difference? Doesn't this all just come down to like what Nintendo wants to call this thing or how they want to market it? Like, I don't know. I don't know that there's too much of a difference. And I think now that we know that this is coming out, it's like even more is like, should we even? Why are we speculating? Like, are we really just splitting feathers here? Like, I don't know. I don't understand.
I think the naming is like draws us to some criticism towards Nintendo, because like we don't call the Nintendo Switch LCD model or like CRT model or mini LED model. Like that doesn't exist on other product lines. Like Apple, they have all their weird naming schemas, and like Samsung and LG, but it's pretty rare to have the technology of a screen in the model of a popular console. Like it's so weird. So that leads me to believe that they couldn't align on what they're going to call this thing. So you just give it a name to differentiate it from the other models, and you explain the tech. Just like you do like a Blu-ray versus DVD or something along those lines. But it's a very weird naming schema to me personally, because I've never seen something so advertised, something that's similar to like a television or a monitor.
I think it really does kind of prove that the theory that Allison was talking about, that this is going to replace it, is true. Because like if you look at their website where they have the comparison thing, the name Nintendo Switch is in bold, the name Nintendo Switch Lite is in bold, and then they have the name Nintendo Switch in bold with regular font in parentheses, OLED model. And I think that that's only going to differentiate it while they're both on the shelves, which
I agree
could be just through this year. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe there'll be lingering models, but like maybe they've ceased production on it and they're gonna, just like you said, package it up with Mario Kart, and all the Black Friday sales or whatever, you know.
I mean, like the PS5 on the box has 8K in the corner. There aren't any fucking games that do 8K, but it's just like a catchy phrase that people are used to seeing on high-end TVs when they go into Costco or whatever. You know what I mean? They're like, oh, okay, well, I know that that's something that TVs can do, and it says it here on the box. So I think people are used to seeing OLED because I think OLED TVs are really starting to finally take off and become more affordable. And so I think it's definitely something. And while you're right, Matt, I do think that there is precedent for this within Nintendo. And just look at the N64. The Nintendo 64 was sold on the fact that it was a 64-bit system, and that's like, that these days would never happen. They would never call it like the PlayStation SSD or whatever. But it's like Nintendo like did that. Like they like forced people to ask like, what does 64 mean? And they're like, well, it's 64-bit. And they're like, well, what's a bit? And then they had to like kind of like figure out that stuff. So it's like they've definitely like done this in the past. It just like feels weird now, I think, in the modern era, where everything has become so iterative. There's a PS2, 3, 4, 5. There's the Xbox 360 and then 1 and then maybe that doesn't make sense. But,
and because they've gone so hard with the XL and it seems perfect for the XL,
they should have called this an XL, I think, right?
Yeah.
Except I think people would have dragged them for that because it's only like it's less, I was like, I can't remember exactly the difference in the screen size, but it was something in the video too, where they advertised as like 0.62 inches bigger. And I was like, what?
So
what does that even mean?
So just
Switch
L.
Just L.
The JL, the just larger, slightly. JLS.
Well, we can continue to talk about this, and maybe we can continue to talk about it through this lens of kind of looking at the history of revisions, because I think when you look back at all the handheld revisions, especially, we can't say that this means what they're going to do, they're exactly this time, but we can maybe see some trends, maybe kind of use that as a way to talk about it. Does that sound like a good plan for now?
Sure.
So like we can really briefly touch on home consoles because they haven't done many iterations of those, but they did make, sort of updated NES and SNES models late in those life cycles, the top loader for the NES, and then a sort of smaller, slicker Super Nintendo. And then they had the Wii revisions, which were actually kind of downgrades.
Yeah.
Which I could also see happening with the Switch maybe someday, of just a box Switch that's cheaper.
Like a TV only Switch.
Yeah.
Like a PlayStation TV Switch.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Wii Mini, which also was a downgrade, right? And then there were some significant add-ons that might be kind of similar in some ways, like the 64 DD, which never really came out here, right? I don't know that Switch will get any big add-on things. Do y'all think that's ever possible? Like,
I don't know where you would add on to it.
Yeah.
without losing the portability.
The Joy-Con rails.
Maybe.
A second screen.
Speaking of rails, can I derail this slightly?
Yeah, please derail.
And we can just talk about how disappointing it is that there's no Joy-Con revisions coming out with this fucking thing.
Right. That's
like
true.
Like Nintendo has been asked, like, are there any like enhancements to the Joy-Cons or anything? And they're like, no, which means that they're still going to drift, right?
Yeah.
Like, how disappointing is that? Like, you don't have to change the form factor, but if they were like, hey, these Joy-Cons have a D-pad and they don't drift, like everybody would fucking buy this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and that's like
Joy-Con, yeah.
That's like not that hard, right? Like to do. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it is.
Yeah, maybe it is.
Slap new Joy-Cons. Yeah.
I don't know. But totally. And that's also another reason I've seen this as an excuse for me to get another Switch, is because I also want to get new Joy-Cons. And it's like, they come packaged in.
Yeah. And they're white.
But so I think looking at the console revisions, we just kind of quickly glossed over. I don't know if there's any takeaways from that for this. But looking at the handhelds more so, I think we can maybe get some info out of that.
I feel like that's where you start to see a lot of parallels here.
Yeah. Well, so there's the Game Boy Advance, the DS, and the 3DS, and we can go through it in order, but each one has had at least a few revisions. The Game Boy had 3 or 4. I guess they had one in Japan that was kind of Japan only, but
the Game Boy Light.
The Game Boy Advance had 3, the DS had 4, the 3DS had 6 versions over 7 years. And that's the most recent one. And I feel like, we were talking about, could they drop another model next year? Well, if we look at the 3DS, they dropped a new model like every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think for sure that this is following the 3DS cycle more than any of the other ones. But I will say something that was pointed out in so IGN had some hands-on with this OLED model, and they were talking about it. And it was Tom Marks who had the hands-on, and in his article about it, he was talking about how this really reminded him, the switch between the LCD screen and the OLED screen reminded him a lot of the Game Boy Advance SP. So the Game Boy Advance SP had a kind of silent revision that happened about halfway through its life cycle, which was basically when the GBA SP came out, it was like, it has a light in it, right? So now you guys can like see what's going on and you don't have to have a lamp on, right? But like the way that it was originally is it was like side lit, or it was like the lights were in the front and they were basically illuminating the panel from the front or from the sides. But then eventually what they ended up releasing was a backlit GBA SP. And that thing actually looked really good. It basically had like a DS screen, right? And he was saying like this revision really reminds him a lot of that. Now, the difference being those fuckers were priced the same and they didn't make a big deal out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that kind of shows a little bit now that Nintendo knows they're like on top and they don't have to like fight for this anymore. But
well, we can jump around if there's anything else. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at some of the history of this, the idea with the Game Boy even and with the DS, with this idea of making a smaller one, right? Which we've got with the Lite, and then making a bigger one or a better one, arguably we have with the OLED. But I just think that 3DS having so many different versions and being the most recent one, and that, with them wanting the Switch to last 10 years, one way they could do that is to release a bunch of versions.
I was going to say, I believe that there's no way that the Switch will last 10 years. If they really are going for 10 years, I don't see it lasting 10 years with its current hardware. Developers, they'll get burned out on it. They'll say, yeah, but I can, especially third-party developers, right? Because they don't want their games to look like crap running on a Switch and have to basically dumb down their games to be released on the Switch.
I don't think as many people buy cloud versions of games for them to keep doing that as well.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That, I guess one question I have about the DS, because it's been, I bought one probably in like 2015. I'm looking at the list of them, and I'm like, yeah, I probably brought the 3DS XL in 2015 or something like that. And I can't remember the price point on it, but I know it's not as much as a home console. It couldn't have been, right? Like I don't think I would have paid $300 for a DS, but I can't remember.
So that's actually something that's kind of interesting about the 3DS, because the 3DS, like at the beginning, was kind of a failure, and they were really concerned because the Wii had just done really well, and the Wii U, I think, was about to come out, and that ended up being a failure. So they were kind of in this little bit of a danger point. But when the 3DS originally first came out, it was priced at $250, and nobody bought the fucking thing because they were like, I've already got a DS. I'm not going to pay $250 to just have like this weird 3D visuals. And that's like a rare instance. We were talking earlier about Nintendo slashing their prices. They slashed the fucking price. They brought that thing down to $170, and then the thing started flying off of the shelves. Yeah. Right. So like, I think the highest,
none of the other revisions were that high either, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think the highest any of the revisions went was $199, right? Like for the new 2DS. Am I right there?
According to what I'm looking at. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So I think they learned their lesson there, and I think like, but they did raise the price slightly on those new 3DSs. Now, Allison, did you have a regular 3DS XL or a new 3DS XL?
That's what I was trying to figure out. I actually have it right next to me. I bought the retro version of it.
Nice.
I literally walked. Oh my god! I walked into the store and I was like, "Well, I have to have that." I was not intending on buying it. When I walked in.
Open it up. Does it have a little nub on the right side?
For our audio listeners, that's the NES version that has the like NES controller.
Yeah.
That's one of the revisions, right? That actually has like more CPU and more RAM, I believe, as well.
it just shows how confusing this name convention is, and releasing that many revisions when you're like, I don't even know which one I have.
Right. I was like, I can just kind of guess based on when I bought it.
Right.
And I'm sure I could look up, the NES edition and it would say, which version it really is. But
well, it doesn't help that they called it the new 3DS.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, oh, what?
Yeah. We can all agree that it's nice that they didn't call this the new Switch, right?
Yes. I prefer that name to Switch OLED to new Switch. Because again, I see new Switch as like new hardware.
Right.
I still think Super Switch is the name.
We here at Super Switch Headz agree with you.
That'll be great for our SEO. Hopefully that happens.
Well, looking at, we kind of glossed over some of this revision history, but knowing that all their handhelds have generally had at least 3 or so, but often more revisions, like I think we can expect more revisions. Is this, how do y'all think this changes? What do you think? I mean, what do you think they can get away with? Do you think we're going to get a few more models at least? If they really, the Switch is doing so well, I think they could really push that 10 years and maybe have sort of a successor Switch that has its backward. I mean, that's what my ideal would be, right? Like at year 10, they release a something that actually can play Switch games still, but could play a newer version, you know what I mean? That has better hardware and like a significant bump or something like that. But in between that, what do you think we get? Go ahead. Sorry,
I think
Allison.
it's going to be difficult because I feel like they can only push the hardware so much without changing it in all of their models. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like they want to keep the price down on the lights. And, that was always supposed to be kind of like the slightly cheaper model. But, once you get into real serious hardware revisions, it doesn't make sense to do it unless you can do it across all your platforms simultaneously. Because I don't think Nintendo wants to be in the same situation that they were with, I think, it was the new 3DS, where you had some games that were only playable on the new 3DS, and then trying to explain that to your customer base, that, hey, you have to buy this new console or you can't play this new game.
Right.
And, they might use that to sell the consoles. Like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wouldn't put it past Nintendo to launch a hardware revision with something like Breath of the Wild 2, something that they know everybody will play. But yeah, it gets kind of dicey, if all of a sudden that game that everybody wants is only playable on one model of your hardware.
Well, I mean, they showed Breath of the Wild 2 in this Switch OLED model presentation. So I mean, we at least know that's going to be on there. Splatoon 3 as well, right?
Yeah.
I think they're making that pretty clear. I do wonder if they're going to just be iterating though, going forward, and I also do think that we're not doing ourselves any favors by heavily speculating on this shit and all these reports coming out, because I think Nintendo is seeing all this Switch Pro discussion and it being a foregone conclusion that this thing is going to come out. And they're like, okay, well, how can we use this to the best of our ability? You know what I mean? And I think that this is kind of part of it. I think that they know people have been hyping this thing up. So they know people are going to snap up whatever revision they do right now. And I think that means that, they could probably iterate less going forward and and just kind of throw little bits in as they go and get people to be like, well, this is the Switch Pro, and and I don't know. I just feel like now more than ever, Nintendo is really watching all this fan speculation. And it's and like we've talked about before on the show, it's gone beyond just gaming circles. People out in the mainstream, are aware of a lot, it was in fucking Bloomberg, for Christ's sake. I'm just concerned that they'll be kind of using this to their advantage to overcharge, iterate less, or whatever. But either way, I think whatever they plan to do, it comes down to how they're going to market it and whether or not this console life cycle lasts 10 years or not. I don't know if that matters as much to Nintendo anymore or to gaming at large these days. You were talking about the Apple stuff. I think Xbox has already moved on from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, David, I've just been thinking about what you're saying, and I'll take the bait. Is how could Nintendo iterate more or less? And I've been trying to think about what could that look like. You offer Joy-Cons, as like one idea. Like there's an opportunity to iterate on Joy-Cons, have more of a grip style, add a D-pad. It's really difficult because like on like smartphones, you get a bigger screen, you get faster things, and that's how you iterate. I guess a new Switch could iterate with a bigger screen, or have like a Switch, something that's handheld only Switch Lite, but can also dock, something along those lines. But I don't know, man. I don't know. I've been thinking about that, and the second thing I've been thinking about, which is like if let's assume Jason Schreier never released his Bloomberg article about Switch Pro.
Well, it wasn't him, but yeah.
About no one knew this OLED model was coming out. None of that shit came out. Like what would our podcast be like? What would our house be like, or the Nintendo fan base be like if we got this OLED model, and what the reaction would be? And I think,
do you think that would be more or less hype? This announcement,
I think it would be a little bit more hype, but pretty much the kind of the same too.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of negativity around it, but I do think that if you look at just this history we've talked about, like we should expect these things. We should expect little revisions, and also like you don't have to buy them, so don't worry about it. But I think they're good entry points for new people. I think there are ways for Nintendo to make this the best-selling console of all time, which I don't know if that matters to them, but the sheer numbers probably matter to them. And I think, because people are going to buy more of them because people that are suckers like us that just want the updated one, but also because they're like, I was thinking about getting a second one for my kid or something. You know what I mean? Like it's a great excuse to do it. Like, yeah.
I've been wanting to upgrade for a while anyway, just because I want to turn this thing into a dedicated modded system. You know what I mean? Like I've been wanting to mod this thing forever, but I've held off out of fear of like getting bricked or like getting my Nintendo account suspended or anything like that. So I'm just going to move all my shit over to the new one, and I'm going to hack the fuck out of this thing. Are you kidding me? I'm going to put Android on it. I'm going to do all this shit that I was too afraid to do before, because I've got the original. This is the pre-Redbox model. Like this thing you can totally hack. And so it's like, that's why I'm getting it, like, and I'm not going to trade this thing in either. I'm going to like keep it and like run Dreamcast games off of it because I fucking can.
For our audio listeners, David is gripping his Nintendo Switch and waving it at the screen.
Waving around like a madman.
For our audio listeners, David is screaming.
Yeah.
they heard that. Rip headphone users.
Oh, God. What's been happening to me is that every time I picked up my Switch since the OLED announcement, I never really noticed the bezel before, and now every time I look at it, I go, "Oh yeah, but it'd be really nice if the screen was just a little bigger." Like totally unconscious. I'm just like, "Oh yeah, that would be nice."
It worked.
Yeah.
It really did. They got me.
Yeah. I mean, they built the bezel that size just so they could upgrade it. You have to know that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should wrap this up and move on. Is there any final thoughts about this? Anything about either the OLED or just Nintendo's revision history, or any trends we want to talk about, or any final parting OLED words?
Yeah.
I hope I can get one.
Yeah, I do too.
I have such anxiety. And I've started like joining Discords that do like hardware releases, so I can get push notifications when Switch pre-orders come out, because Nintendo might not announce when pre-orders come out. So there's some anxiety. I want to spend my money, but I don't want to be anxious about spending my money.
Yeah. That's a dumb thing. That's just a very modern
place.
Problem for buying new things. It seems like new electronic things, especially.
I feel like now more than ever, the term hype responsibly needs to be really etched into all our brains. You know what I mean? Like, cause it's like people are disappointed right now, and that's our fault. Not Super Switch Headz, but just the Nintendo fandom in general. You know what I mean? Like, I think we need to take every fucking thing we hear with a grain of salt and not get our hopes up too much about this kind of shit. You know what I mean? Because like people were expecting a DLSS Switch to come out at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like,
and not just expecting, they were like, sure.
Yeah.
They just like, they were like, it's absolutely coming this year. And it's like,
right.
Let's pump
and
the
like,
brakes.
yeah. And you're right, Matt. I think in a vacuum, I think this announcement would have been really hype. I think people would have been, and I think people still are excited about it, but it's like, I think we just need to Maybe we can help in doing that with our podcast. You know what I mean? Just like be the ones that are just like, hey, everybody shut the fuck up. That's just
hey, I did it with the Zelda 35th anniversary.
That's true. Yeah. You might have been right on that one too. So we'll see. But anyway, that's all I have to say. I also hope I get one. I think the white Joy-Cons look pretty good. I think a white dock means that it's going to be really easy for kids to take a permanent marker to it and completely deface it. But yeah, no, I'm excited for it for sure.
All right. Well, with that, then we'll take a short break and come back and talk about all the games that we've been playing recently. I played through Shovel Knight, the Shovel of Hope, the main campaign within the last week. I've not played Shovel Knight before, but I loved it. I will probably play through some of the other ones now.
Do you have a treasure trove?
Yes. So I'm planning to do Plague Knight next, but I'm taking a short break. That was a lot of fun. I started finishing 3D World, Super Mario 3D World, because I got really into Bowser's Fury and beat that. And my son and I were playing 3D World, and he got disappointed when we got to some point where it was like, you don't have enough stars. He's like, I don't want to go back for those. So I started like just working on 100%ing it. He saw me doing that and was like, I'll play that with you. So we jumped back to where we were, and we saw credits roll on that. And I will now go back and start 100%ing it again.
Yeah. Let me know if you want anybody to play with you that isn't your kid.
Sure. Anytime you want. I'm just enjoying doing that. And then I'm still playing God of War, and I started playing Gardens Between again, which is another game I started with my son, but he got bored with. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and finish that. So I've had a busier than usual playing lots of different games this week.
Very cool. I'll go next. Sorry, Matt. It's me.
Fucking do it, man. Pull that trigger. Let's fucking go.
You're like,
let's talk about video games.
All right, anyway, I haven't been playing too much, which is why I wanted to go next. I have been playing more Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2. That is just how you do a goddamn remake. That is so good. I'm having such a great time with it. And just getting really way reinvigorated by that whole franchise. And it just plays so well. I'm just so happy with that franchise. So I'm glad that is finally on the Switch. I was looking forward to that for a while. I've also been like just incredibly beyond fanboy hyped for the new Monkey Ball Banana Mania remakes of 1 and 2. Those are like my favorite games. Some of my favorite, probably my top 5 games of all time. So I've been just like daydreaming about like buying like original Monkey Ball cabinets with like the banana controller and shit like that. And then it even got me to go back and play Super Monkey Ball Junior for the Game Boy Advance. Have you guys played that game? It is a game that should not exist. It is like a full 3D Super Monkey Ball game on the Game Boy Advance. It's like it's a technical marvel for like what the Game Boy Advance is, but also you are controlling it with like a D-pad. You know what I mean? So like it's totally batshit. It runs at like 5 frames per second. But it's actually really fun and like pretty amazing that they were able to scrunch down the original Super Monkey Ball into a Game Boy Advance cartridge. So strangely, I've been playing that. What I played most recently was actually a demo for Chris Tales. Are you guys familiar with this game, Chris Tales? It's like an upcoming
animated. It's like hand drawn.
Yeah,
RPG.
the character designs are very hand drawn, 2D animated. It's like an indie developed RPG. It's been getting a lot of like buzz. I think it's been in development for like 5 years or something like that, and it's been getting a lot of like comparisons to like Chrono Cross or not Chrono Cross, but like Chrono Trigger and stuff like that.
Say no more. Downloading it now.
Definitely try it out.
Okay,
right? There's a demo out right now, and the demo kind of has like the beginning of the game, and then it also has this like gauntlet section, because a lot of the beginning of the game there isn't a lot of combat, and it's a lot of just like really early game fetch questing, which really kind of turned me off of it. But then there's also this like Coliseum mode, which is like basically like kind of a increasingly difficult battles, like all like 8 in a row. So it shows you a little bit more of like the actual battle mechanics. And I don't think ultimately this game is for me after I've tried the demo. I'm kind of hard on RPGs anyway, but I was kind of like enthralled by the visual style of the game and kind of some of the comparisons I'd heard about it. So I wanted to give it a go. It's interesting. It's got this kind of cool mechanic where basically you get these crystals that allow you to see both into the past and into the future at the same time. So like there's always this triangle on the screen, and like whatever is like, I'll kind of show it in my screen here. It's like whatever is in this triangle is like the present, and then anything over here is in the past, and anything over on this side of the triangle is in the future. So like depending on where you are on the screen, you can see like different parts of time. And then so that works where like you'll have to do a fetch quest for somebody and then have them bring it to the future, and then that goes to the past, and then that also works in the battles as well, the way you can like send somebody to the future and then they're like metal rusts or whatever, so you can like break their shield more easily or something like that. So to me it kind of felt like a gimmick, like they were like, we just want to make an RPG and we need like something to differentiate it from all the other RPGs, and there's a lot of 2D RPGs as well, so it's like we need to even differentiate from that. But I might be being a little harsh on it. Definitely, I would say it's nice that it has a demo in the eShop. I don't know. Maybe if it comes out and has good reviews, I'll pick it up. But definitely an interesting game.
Yeah. I also haven't been playing a ton this week for a couple of reasons. One, because like work is starting to pick back up a little bit, but also like a moth to the flame, I know that at the end of the week I will be playing Skyward Sword again.
Yay.
I had actually before they announced that they were going to do an HD remake, I'd been kind of home long enough, and I dug out my Wii and set it back up to play a little bit, and that was like the first game at the top of my my stack in there, and I was like, okay, I'm curious, are the controls as bad as I remember them? And so I played through probably like 10 to 15 hours of it, and then they announced the remake, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna put that on the shelf because there was a lot of it that I didn't remember. I was kind of surprised. I hadn't really played it since release, so I am looking forward to playing that one again, especially with the quality of life upgrades.
How did you feel about the motion controls upon revisiting it?
I still didn't really have a problem with them. I think
I never did either.
It was a different style of play, right? And because I had played, I never had a GameCube, which makes me very sad. And it's my one reason why I really want them to, because I didn't have a GameCube and I didn't have a Wii U, and I know I should just go out and buy a Wii U at this point, but I have never gotten to play Wind Waker, and I'm gutted by that. And I'm like, I just want that on the Switch so that I don't have to buy another console to then find the game, buy the game, and play it. But
and then they'll announce it as soon as you do that.
Exactly. As soon as I start it, I'll be like, well, damn it.
So you should go get one, actually. Please, for all of us.
So like the first Zelda game that I played on the Wii was Twilight Princess, and I remember a lot of like this. Audio only listeners won't see what I'm doing, but I'm basically like shaking my hand back and forth because I remember that was the combat. It was like take the Wiimote and shake it like crazy, and you'll kill everything around you. And the combat in Skyward Sword worked so much differently because it was a lot slower. And that's what I think caught a lot of people off guard, was that you had to just kind of sit and wait and slowly move the Wiimote around. You couldn't, really fast move it around because the gyros couldn't, keep up with it. So I'm interested to see how it performs, because I'm going to play it in both modes. I'm going to play it with, the Joy-Cons and with probably a Pro Controller. To see how it handles, with the Joy-Con gyros. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of revisit that game again. But yeah, really, I've this week I was kind of like, to get in my Zelda mindset, I was continued through the Hyrule Warriors DLC, which is an easy one to kind of like pop in and out of, So I like pop in, play a few stages, be like, okay, I'm good, and then pop back out, slowly grinding my way through that. And a little bit of like Pokemon Snap, same thing, because I can just kind of turn it on and turn off my brain.
Chill games.
Yeah. Before I like dive into another like long form game. So
very good.
Allison, you reminded me of like you're talking about the Wii, and I was watching videos of Wii bowling like back in the day, like 2009, and I was like, I think we're at the time where if we set up a party to play Wii bowling, I think people would fucking go and play Wii bowling. Like
100%.
We got bowling shirts. We got matching bowling jackets. We got names. We go all out. I think people would be into that. I think we're right at the time. It's just retro enough.
My question would be, would everybody remember exactly where they had to stand to throw a strike every time? Because I feel like Wii bowling was so broken because you could just go and stand in one exact spot, and then it didn't really matter what you did.
Yeah.
with the
It's like riding a
Wiimote.
bike.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like people would find that in like the first like 5 or 6 throws, and then it'd all be over again.
Man, that was such a different time. Like all over YouTube, there's a bunch of videos, like hype videos from senior living communities as they have this like bracket to play Wii bowling against other senior living communities. And I was like, what a fucking time. I think people would be into that now. This
Well,
is a
now
pitch.
we're old, and I think it's time for us to have these old person parties.
Let's fucking do it. So I've been thinking about Wii bowling a lot. It's what I've been doing. But also, like, I'm still learning about Metroid, getting really deep into the lore, and really hoping that Nintendo does something with that rich, deep story. Since Microsoft is coming out with a Halo show on Paramount Plus, I would love to see Nintendo do something with the rich universe that I love, Metroid. It'd be cool. And I already mentioned at the top of the show, I've been watching shit ton of fucking anime and Evangelion and questioning my existence and what my identity is as a person.
Congratulations.
Do you have do you have another anime queued up now that Evangelion's done?
I might watch the movies. I'm not sure if I'm gonna watch the Evangelion movies, like the 4 or 5. I'm not sure, but I think Hunter x Hunter. I think that's the next one that I might watch.
I've heard that's a very good one.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions?
I don't know what you've seen so far. Have you like just started or?
This is an anime podcast. Get the fuck out.
All right, we'll wrap it
Hey,
up.
how about you check out Masters of the Universe Revelation when it drops on July 23rd on Netflix.
Hey, wait a second.
All right, that does it then for this episode. Thank you so much, Allison, for coming on and talking to us. We appreciate it. Thanks to MilkyWay.co, who does our website. Thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick Online, I am most places PDYX.
Hey, I'm on Twitter, Matthew, MATHYOU.
I'm pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about you, Allison? Where can people find you online?
I am a little reclusive on social media, but I pop in on I lurk on the Discord and I am on the Facebook page every now and then.
Very nice.
Very good. Cool. Yeah. So that's a great plug for our communities. If you'd like to join any of our Switch Headz communities, we're on there on the Discord and our Facebook group, both of which are very active all the time. And if you'd like to find our show on social media, we're also out there on Twitter. We are at Switch Headz, and on Instagram and Facebook, we are at Super Switch Headz. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode on the Nintendo Switch OLED model. Can't wait to play Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo Switch Online on my Nintendo Switch OLED model. Really nice. It's a mouthful. But thank you so much for listening to this, and thank you again, Allison, for joining us. That was an absolute delight. We're going to be back next week. Fuck it, let's spoil it. We're going to be talking all about Skyward Sword next week. It's the big release here in July. And so we're going to be talking about it. We're all going to have a little bit of hands-on experience playing with this game. And we'll be talking about that next week. So if you're interested on whether or not this game is worth a day one purchase, well, this episode will come out after it comes out. But, well, if you want to know if you should buy it within the first week, listen to our show next week. And we'll be able to give you that information. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You know we love you. Stay good out there. Stay safe. If you're not vaccinated, get vaccinated. But if you are, go out there, man. Go kiss everybody you see. Go lick a bunch of doorknobs. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.